All right, we're gonna get started. So this session is the one web app to serve them all. Our presenter is Reggie Sanders. He comes from Florence County in South Carolina. He's been with Florence County since 2003, starting off in the tax assessor's office as a cadastral mapper. Once GIS mapping was implemented, he was promoted to GIS technician. Then he was moved to the GIS department and was made an analyst in 2015 and was later promoted to the data administrator. So please hold all of your questions until the end of the presentation. For our online attendees, please put your questions in the chat. Also, make sure your name is correct in the Zoom login to get credit for attending. This session is being recorded and will be available online in a few weeks on the conference website.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Sorry. All right, so as you can tell by my screenshot here, this is very silly. So the main thing about so in the GIS department, basically we try to create a lot of products, if you will, to serve either different departments, citizens, and things like that. So a lot of our things that we have out there, we have to figure out a use case for who's going to use it. Our main one is our Parcel Search web app. The one that we have on the site now has about, since it's launched, over like 500,000 hits because it's used internally, externally. I mean, everybody kind of uses it. So it's kind of the map that I'm going through on this one is kind of what will replace it in theory. So the main thing we have to do is figure out, since that map's used internally and then also the public uses it, how to make sure everybody gets as much as they can out of it. Because right now we have a couple different departments that I have specialized maps for them, which is fine. But the problem turns into, it's like, oh, I wanted to also do this thing, and it kind of splinters off. So there we go. So first thing, legal mumbo jumbo. Always have to have, like on your splash screen, the wording to be like, okay, use this, but realize this isn't like legal, like boundaries and things like that. Because people we saw a particular situation where somebody's just like, I looked on the GIS data and the survey line said this. Slow down. So depictions of where the property is, not necessarily the actual lines is there. There we go. So all our legal information. Always important to have a splash screen. So our first option that we have on the map here on the web app, excuse me. I don't know, it's kind of taking its time. All right, so here we have, this is the Parcel Report. Who in here uses Web App Builder? Who uses Web App Builder Developer Edition? If you haven't used Web App Developer Edition, if you can do a lot of nifty stuff with that, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So the Parcel Report here is actually, it's called the screening widget. If you haven't played with that before, it's a really, really kind of neat widget that they have out there. Because it gives you basically get like, kind of how you have your print option where it'll give you the map itself, and then you have like not a summary, but a table of contents or a legend that shows everything. This actually can give you that pop-up information. So a lot of times we'll have people come in and they want to see the information about the parcel. And instead of saying, okay, let me click this and do a print screen, you can actually, it gives you a nice little breakdown. And it looks like it just gives you an official report of all that data that was in your pop-up screen. And then what's also cool about it is, if you have anything that does like an arcade code in there, it'll also show whatever is in there instead of, because sometimes arcade's weird since it creates a kind of a virtual field, if you will. A lot of times it doesn't show up when you go through like attribute table and stuff like that. So next we have, this is the actual Parcel Search. So we actually, instead of having one catch-all search, we broke it down into individual searches. So you have Parcel Search here only searches by TMS numbers. So whenever a person puts in the TMS number, it goes to that parcel, highlights that parcel. Next, we have E911 address search. So with the E911 address search, it uses our verified addresses. So a person can search by that. This is it goes exactly to where that point is. We broke them up into two. So we have our E911 address search, then the general address search. The reason we have two, because a lot of times if there's sometimes people will put in maybe if it's Southborough Road or something like that, and they might want to put in S, or they want to put in, they combine the road together. Even though when you have it in that search where you have some tolerance for it, it try and see what you have in the field, but it can only pull what's in that field. It doesn't do a good job. Sometimes you almost have to be too accurate. So we also did a general search, which uses just Esri's, their world locator, which is a bit more forgiving. Now with the world locator, obviously it doesn't get spot on to where the location is. It kind of gives a general idea, but it at least gets you close. And then of course, like we have our addresses on there, so you can still see if I put in 123 Mockingbird Lane and it shows up over to the corner, you can still see where the addresses are. And sometimes people will look and just say it's a citizen might not know the actual address. They always thought it was 123 when it's actually 124 or something like that. Owner search, kind of self-explanatory. It just goes, it uses the ownership layer that's in our tax map data, type in the owner, and then we have like a secondary one. So the way our stuff is kind of broken down, you have right here, you have where it has owner name, and then this blank right here is actually like an additional owner. So if it has like two owners, like Mr. Alan Johnson and Jill, if you want to look up by that, you can also, it uses both those fields to kind of find that owner. Our road search, again, self-explanatory. If a person doesn't know an address but wants to know a road, and what's kind of neat about this, you'll get the road and then you'll get the municipality it falls in. So a lot of times, like Main Street, there's like 20 main streets in a county. It's just like, is it Main Street in Florence? Is it Main Street in Lake City? So major point search. Major point search is basically for you're trying to find the mall, anything like that. So that's another kind of self-explanatory. You're just trying to find major points in the city or in the county. Oops. Layer swipe. A lot of times people want to see that, because sometimes the map can be busy, depending on where you are. If there's a lot of addresses in the area, but you want to see, you want to like quickly look at the parcels, you can swipe away. If you hadn't used, I'm pretty sure everybody's kind of used the tool. You can kind of swipe away whatever layers you're trying to look at. So this one is addresses and then also parcels. Lastly, toggle layer, just cutting on layers on and off. Okay, so we have a couple different print options. You probably can't see it in here. On the bottom here, we have a standard print, and then we have an employee print. The standard print is the standard template. If you've used it before, it basically, again, just has the map and then just a legend that's at the bottom and gives you some basic information. So we have that the public can use, but we also have an employee print option. Okay. I don't think it wants to go. Okay, well, here's our standard print. I think I had too many things going on. So that's the standard print. Again, you have a scale, your legend here, and just the map. Our employee print, there we go. Our employee print is a special one that we did. It actually has a login that they use. It's just a basic login. It's like Flowco print, printer one. And the only reason why we separated it is a lot of times when the public comes in for a map, they usually want, we, we usually do 11 by 17, which at home, a lot of people don't have that option. So even though with the standard print, when you can do a bunch of them, but uh-oh. Okay. Oh,
One moment.
okay, sorry about that. But while they get that kind of squared away, the employee print, I have a general template that they have, and then there's a general login where everybody can kind of go in and use that. If a person wants a more official print, it has like the county symbol, things like that. So a person can kind of go in and if they were like, I want an actual map from the assessor's office or from the GIS department, it has something that's a little bit more, I want to say valid, but if it kind of, they just want a nicer, bigger map. So, because that was, like I said, if the mappers were busy and couldn't print a map for a person, this way at least one of the ladies at the front could print a map and it still looked official. And as you can see, the template's just different. I say every time I was. You might have to advance it. It's not advancing. There we go. So the draw tool. So what the draw tool here, basically for planning in particular, and this is for anybody who wants to use it. But specifically, I put this one in here. A lot of times if a person wants to come in and move like a mobile home or they want to build something, they have to draw. It doesn't have to be an official thing. They just have to draw like a site plan to give the plan. And so they'll be able to say, okay, where do you want to put the building? So this option's in there. They can go in. And this is another reason why, if you haven't used Developer Edition, it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff out there, especially on Esri's Geonet stuff, a lot of custom tools and widgets that are out there that do a really good job. Esri's baked-in tools are really good, but there's some tools out there that are a bit more edited that you can do things with. Like this one in particular, I think the standard Esri tool can't follow along the line, and I don't think it can actually print with the information on there. This one in particular, you can actually have the dimensions on the lines and things like that, and it'll actually print out when you do the print option. So that's kind of what this one was here for. You might have the next slide. And one more, I think. That's all I highlight. Okay, so this is some of my setup stuff. So that map actually uses a different service that there's a file database that I kind of put all this stuff out there, that it kind of sits out on the server rather than pulling directly from our stuff. Because typically what happens if there's a hiccup in the actual process and things go down, and if it's pulling directly from our stuff that's on SD, the map explodes and you get a lot of angry calls. So what happens with this process is I basically stop the service that I have, and then it kind of recreates this file database, deletes the old one, puts that one back, and then kind of compacts it down and does all this stuff to it and kind of cleans it up. So I have this as a scheduled task. And if you haven't done it yet, there's a nifty little thing you can do, because I'm not good with Python, but I like Model Builder a lot. But you can use Python to like run a model like outside of it. So a lot of stuff I do like that, I'll make a model in here and then just put to make myself feel like I'm a programmer. Just like I'm gonna run my Python script that runs my model. So so basically what this does, it runs every morning at about 3 o'clock. And another thing to know, if you do that, make sure you set a reminder to log back into ArcGIS Pro, because after like 2-3 weeks, it decides, hey, you haven't phoned home the mothership yet, and you need to log back in, because it'll say it runs, but it didn't run. So next slide. Oh, and that's gonna go through just keep going. I didn't spoke through all that. I'm sorry. All right, so one thing, if you've ever noticed, especially with web app builder stuff, I don't know if you can see it, but when it highlights, it has this, I call it that dang blue line. So if you ever look at a map I did, the parcel lines are always yellow because I'm colorblind. In a lot of places you use red lines and it's terribly hard to see. So I said there was always a way you had to do something with being able to change this line. As much customization you have with Web App Builder, there has to be a way to change that line. I asked developers and all these people, it's just like, oh, we don't have it, maybe in a future thing. So, so I thought about it, and using all my intense big brain knowledge of Azure, I did one of the best next best thing. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. I used Google. so and sure enough, again, Geonet, this little tiny piece of code. Next slide, please. Right here. That's all it took. And you basically would say you can change the length of the thickness of the line, and then also the color. So next slide. So that's, and also with inside of this also, there's another part. I don't think I have it up here, but you know how you have your icon at in your tab. So there's a spot, you might not be able to see it on here, but further up, this file right here is basically whenever you create your web app and then you put it up there, it puts everything in a folder. This is the index text file that's inside that folder. So there's a lot of customization you can do inside of that. And there's actually a part at the top where you can point to a different icon for your icon in the top of your tab. Typically you get the little web app builder triangle. I can't show it on this. I wish I could do a live demo, but so instead of that, I put like our county symbol, which is just kind of exciting. It's just, it's neat little stuff. You can also do like cool GIFs when it's loads and everything like that. So next screen. All right, so back to some of the pop-up stuff. There's a lot of arcade stuff that I have in here. Next slide. Next one. And one more. Okay, so these particular fields right here, all these are using arcade expressions. So for address on site, instead of, we have a field that would have the addresses that are on site, but if there's like 100 addresses on a particular parcel, because it's like a mobile home park or something like that, there's a cutoff. And then also the way it display is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is just, it doesn't line up well. So, but using arcade to say, hey, any point that exists within this polygon, just display those. So it'll display kind of down in a list. And then you can actually, it'll put all of them on there, rather than if there's a cutoff to how many, a cap to how many characters you can have in that particular field. So it works out a little bit better. Same with like the municipality. It takes some of the weight of having to put a field into your data or changing your data. You can just take your data as it is. And if you have some other, just say if there's another way you want to drill down into another layer that's in your map, you can just use arcade to do it. If you haven't messed around with arcade's really cool. I'm not, again, a good programmer, but there's a lot of information out there on Geonet where you can find some really cool things that people have done. Like particularly this one right here for flood zone designation. So if water runs through it, because typically you want to see where the water runs, but a lot of times people know how much of my property is in AE or whatever that is. So this gives you at least a percentage, and this one breaks down, okay, 59.41% of that is in AE floodway, 2% is in AE, and it just kind of breaks that down. And this right here is for the address one. So again, if there's an address that's on that site, it'll list all the addresses. If there's nothing, this is nothing. Next slide. So the downside with all the arcade stuff is sometimes you fly a little too close to the sun, because it can you get kind of like, oh, I can just point all this data from all my other data, but it can slow it down a bit. So that's some of the issues I have had with this one. Trying to find that happy balance between, okay, I have all this stuff because if you saw like the actual breakdown of that particular layer with everything on there, it's like 20 like arcade expressions that are in there that are just like, okay, this might be a bit much, maybe a real. So next slide. All right. Any questions? Sure. Yeah. I looked into Experience Builder. Huh. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The question was some of the print functionality that's in Web App Builder. Have I looked at it in Experience Builder? I know just recently, I think they just added a print option in in Experience Builder because I think right after UC is when they actually had the option in there because I like Experience Builder. I was really excited for it when they previewed it because it seemed like there was a bunch of stuff you could do because it seems like they've moved towards this thing of having everything. I want to say like web web website feely the way they kind of build off everything, but it just there was a lot of things that was lacking as far as on Experience Builder or just it just didn't translate over well. It's still easier to build stuff in Web App Builder. Because I looked at the print option, and even though it's there, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it was as I won't say easy, but as useful as it was with Web App Builder. So I don't know if the answer is that. I have looked into it, but it's just every time I look into it and say, "Oh, I want to build this," it usually isn't as fast, and it just seems like it takes a lot of time to do something. I spent more time trying to line everything up into a square rather than putting the data out there. So, okay, yes, ma'am. Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Okay. So the question was on the arcade expression for the percentages, is it calculating it on the fly or is it pulling from a field? So yeah. So but yeah, it's calculated on the fly. So it's and I can send you I can send you the code if you want because it's actually really neat. It's I forgot who did it because again if you Google is your friend, and especially Geonet, there's a lot of smart people on there. The code that they have was actually for soil types, and I just retrofit. If you look at it, it still says such and such soil type, and I'm just like flood, like so. But no, it calculates it on the fly. The downside of that is, especially with that one, because there's two. There's actually I have two sets of that. Not two sets. I have it's the same thing, but it's my tax information or tax parcels, and they're on there twice. And one of them you can't see because there's actually a button you click over to say, "Hey, more data," and it goes to that one you can't see because it takes a little longer because it's calculating all that on the fly. So it is kind of hefty, but and especially when people are expecting things at that speed. Um, but you can do a lot with it. I think I also have it for the zoning part too, but I can see it definitely. Anything else? Sure. The question was, did I take a class on Web App Builder or Developer Edition, or did I just hop onto it? I just hopped onto it. I did like regular Web App um, Builder, like some of the stuff Esri had out there, but I just kind of hopped into it. It's not difficult. The worst part is figuring a way of hosting it. Um, Creating some of the stuff like there, I can't do it. Like, but there's a lot of documentation out there. A lot of people have put a lot of work into some of their custom tools. There's two guys. I think one's matter of fact. I think Kevin out here with Eagle View has a lot of useful tools that he had on Geonet, and then also there's another guy, Richard. I think he's like a legend on the forum out there, and they have a lot of custom tools that they've created. The only thing you do, you literally just kind of pop it in. Setting up developer edition is kind of aggravating because it just gives you a zip file that you just open, unzip it, and then you have to create in either, or you have to have an enterprise, you have to create like a token and then link to that token. And then once it sees that and say, hey, you can create on web app builder developer edition. So the process isn't easy, but I just kind of hopped into it. I like to tinker, so. Anything else? All right. Well, thank y'all. Here's my information.